All right. So this week we complete the acronym CHAIRS, which is a framework that's designed for a woman to show respect and love to her husband. Last week, Ernie and Monica discussed the C, the H, and the A, which is conquest, hierarchy, and authority. Today, we're going to cover I, R, and S, which is insight, relationship, and sexuality. Now, when I first started reading the chapters on insight, it felt a little weird because these sections are supposed to be geared towards women or the wife as a way for them to connect with their husbands. But as I kind of worked through this section, I realized that I need to approach this like I did when I first started reading the book, which was to grasp a greater understanding of myself or for you guys and yourself. Now, I found it difficult in the past to communicate my needs to Liz because I didn't truly understand my needs or my feelings. We would be on this proverbial crazy cycle, and I struggled to not only understand her needs, but I struggled to understand my own. Without that true understanding, I would find myself reacting to what I felt were her accusations that I've now come to understand was just her desire for that acronym of couple, that closeness, that openness, that understanding, the peacemaking, the loyalty, and the esteem, and not being able to truly communicate my needs for chairs. Chairs being conquest, hierarchy, authority, insight, relationships, and sexuality. Now, with this understanding and her eventual reading of this book, which we have discussed and she's already agreed to, I truly believe that we're going to find ourselves on the energizing cycle, as Eggers calls it more often. Now, in chapter 19, Eggers discussed I for insight, appreciating his desire to analyze and counsel. Now, he opens the story with a wife who was constantly putting her husband down, mocking him, and making fun of his ideas and opinions. This was self professed by her. She found some time in her day to visit her husband at his office. And when she arrived, she saw that her husband was really busy, as he had already kind of shared with her when she told him that she was going to come and visit with him. Now, between meeting with coworkers and bosses and his secretary and an older gentleman that she described as obviously someone that was more experienced in the company than her husband, she was able to see this high level of respect that he was given, how people looked up to him and admired him. And she was a bit mortified based on the description that Eggers gives. She thought about all the times that she put him down, made fun of him behind his back, and she wasn't trying to be disrespectful per se. Rather, she saw him in a different light than what these other people saw him. And this made me think of a lot of interactions that I've had with couples where the wives would do similar things. It made me think of times that Liz or even my daughter, even out of jest, would do similar things in the past. It wasn't that they were trying to be disrespectful, they were just trying to be playful, but not understanding the impact it had on me. And so eventually this led to some hard conversations and of course, some habits die hard, but it's understanding that allows us to have these conversations of truth and honesty. Now, it's understood our wives know the worst in us, all our mistakes, all the missteps that we make and have made in the past. And this can lead to some form of disrespect. I don't necessarily think it's on purpose, yet it doesn't take away from how it makes us feel. Now, Eggers goes on to explain in that scenario that she may think that her husband has little to teach her, little wisdom to share, because she may think of all of her responsibilities she has to take care of on her end for the household. And he just wouldn't understand the decisions and the pressures that she's under. Now, how he talked about how he had preached for over 20 years on a man's understanding of a woman's intuition and how a husband should listen to that intuition. But in those efforts, he realized that he may have tipped the scale a little bit too much to the other end. Now, in my perspective, it seems that in an effort to bring women to the forefront and the equality movement and the feminist movement, it's pushed for women to take control of some households and for men to take a back seat and highlight the mistakes and the lack of knowledge that men bring to the table. Or even the thought that men have pushed women down, or even the movement that I've heard from some women that they don't need a man, of course, until they need to open that jar of pickles, as an example. Now, this isn't to say that a woman's intuition isn't important. It's important to note that Eggert states that we all have blind spots, men and women, and we're better couples when we find balance. He goes on to state, yes, men should listen to their wives, who are naturally intuitive, but wives should not fail to appreciate the insight God has given their husbands and reject their counsel. He goes on to reiterate that neither men nor women can walk around self righteous, thinking they don't sin. He notes that what he has experienced is that some women do not see themselves as sinning, even though they may readily admit that they have bad habits or wrong attitudes. They sometimes easily write these off as chemical imbalances or hormonal problems or dysfunctions due to family of origin. He references a thought I've had in the past prior to my realizing the need to communicate my own needs and a requirement for a change in order to have a healthy relationship with Liz. The thought being, if I say something, I'm in trouble. If I don't say something, I'm in trouble. But if I don't say something, I'm in less trouble. Now, unfortunately, this is something that I learned from my dad. Actually, we talk every Sunday. He comes over for coffee, and I hear the same thing over and over again. And it's exactly as Eggert's put it. If I say something, I'm in trouble. If I don't say something, I'm in trouble. But if I don't say something, I'm in less trouble. Now, my mom is a hard woman to live with. I love my mom, and she is a hard woman to live with because she is exactly the woman that Eggert describes in this chapter. And at 70 years old, she hasn't realized it yet. He finishes the chapter with ways a wife can make her husband feel appreciated, reiterating the need to show a man what he needs for love, and that is giving him respect. Now, in chapter 20, we discuss relationship, appreciating his desire for shoulder to shoulder friendship. This is a really interesting chapter for me because it wasn't anything I'd ever really thought about or considered. But once I read through it, it made so much sense. And I definitely learned a lot about myself in this particular chapter. In this chapter, he describes the differences between time spent for a woman face to face versus for men, which is shoulder to shoulder. Women generally want to talk about experiences, whereas men want to share their experiences. He used examples of a husband asking his wife to come into the same room as him and just be around him. He didn't want to talk, he just wanted her presence. Now, some women may not understand this because, in their eyes, it may be a waste of time. There's work to do around the home, there are chores to get done, or they could be talking. Now, he uses two other examples of a man taking his wife hunting for deer with a bow and arrow. And all they did was basically set up equipment and take the equipment down when they were done with their trip. They hadn't seen a deer, they hadn't shot a deer, And then the second example was a woman that, or a wife that decided that she was going to try something kooky, as she put it, and just join her husband in his workshop as he worked on a project. She said nothing and just watched. In both instances, the husbands felt that it was an awesome experience. Now, it made me think about activities I love doing with Liz or things that she does for me that I really have appreciated. I love that she goes on runs with me. It's something I've been wanting for a really long time. And she never understood it. She runs about half my pace, doesn't get why it doesn't bother me that I've got to run slower or why it's so important for me that she runs with me. But I want to show her. I want to show her the trails where you can see deer as you're running by, or the morning sunrises and how beautiful it is, or running through different parts of our neighborhood because it looks different when you're running through it versus when you're driving through it. I've told her about all the spots that I wanted to show her on the running trail. And I do love that she wants to be at the finish lines of my races, even though I try to give her the option because I know it can be chaotic and maybe even boring waiting for me to finish running a race. But I also love working out with her in the gym. Even if we don't work out together, I love being able to see her there in the distance. I like to walk up, give her a little pat on the butt, a kiss on the cheek or the lips, and then be able to get back to my workout. It's also why us men talk about running marathons together, Spartan races, why we grew so close in the project, and why men develop such strong relationships in the military. We're doing things together, shoulder to shoulder, working together, accomplishing together. Now, later in the chapter, Eggerichs refers to a study between males and females from four age groups. There were second graders, there were sixth graders, there were 10th graders, and 25-year-olds. And what they would do is they would put the two males and the two females together. So the two males in one room, the two females in another room. And they did that for all the age groups. And what they were to do is they were to sit in the chairs and talk if they wish. Now, immediately what they found were that the females would turn and face one another and talk, while the males would continue to sit side by side, staring forward and maybe occasionally giving each other a glance. They assumed that the females would develop a stronger relationship. But what they found were the ones that had the most intimate and transparent conversations were actually the 10th grade boys. Now, I never understood the root of it until I read this chapter. We want to be friends, best friends with our wives. And Eggerichs references the word filio. Filio meaning brotherly or friendship love. In Titus chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, Paul says, older women should teach their younger women to filio their husbands. That is, to be friendly to them. Eggerichs mentions that he's often asked husbands if their wives love them, and they would quickly reply, yes, of course she does. But when asked if their wives like them, often the answer is no, or I'm not sure. And I've met many men growing up that felt similarly. I've often wondered, is this how it's supposed to go? If over time that would be what my marriage would depreciate into. Again, referencing my parents, this is exactly the way that I view my parents' relationship. This is the way that I thought my marriage would eventually go towards. Is that they wouldn't necessarily, or my mom wouldn't necessarily like my dad. She just loves him. And I was worried that eventually I would come to the point where Liz would love me but she wouldn't necessarily like me. Now, he ends the chapter with a story about some neighbors that he had as a boy. He recalled one couple where the husband would be working on his car while his wife was sitting on a stool, smoking a cigarette, doing her nails, or just chewing gum. He talked about how they never got divorced, while so many couples on the block actually did. She somehow understood the need her husband had purely for her presence. And I'm super happy to know that my relationship doesn't have to end like those others where the wife loved but didn't like. Now, in chapter 21, there is the appreciating his desire for sexual intimacy. Now, in this chapter, Eggerichs discusses a man's need for sexual intimacy. Just as a woman has a need for emotional release, a man has a need for physical release through sexual intimacy. Men are visually oriented when it comes to sexual desire. This isn't a secret. And a man can come under satanic attack when deprived of sexual release. Eggerichs relates it to what it would feel like if a husband never wanted to talk to his wife. She too would come under that satanic attack. Both scenarios could and probably would lead to them being tempted by someone outside the marriage that was willing to provide the attention that the other wasn't willing to give. He shares a story of a young woman that, after a conference, told her mother that she wasn't coming over for their weekly Sunday morning visit. When asked why, she said her husband was in a twit. Now, that's a new term for me. I've never heard that, but I'm assuming he was in a bad mood of some sort. When asked why, the daughter explained it had been over a week since they were sexually intimate. The mother gently and firmly let her daughter have it, saying, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Why would you deprive him of something that takes such a short amount of time and makes him so happy?" Now, I'm not sure if the husband would appreciate the whole short amount of time reference, but I'm sure he would have appreciated knowing that his mother in law had his back when it came to his need for sexual release. Now, it's easy for both of us, husbands or wives, to want our sexual or emotional needs to be met while forgetting the needs of the other. And it's important that we remember that we can't get what we need by depriving our partners of what they need. He also goes on to explain that we have a natural desire to have wandering eyes. It's hard for us to share these struggles with our wives because it's hard for them to really empathize because they don't necessarily lust after men's bodies like we do for women's. It goes back to her own fear or that need for that esteem or loyalty in the couple acronym. She wonders, how can he be tempted by another woman? Does he love only me or not? All she knows is that it's not right to be tempted by any other woman in any way. And she doesn't want to hear anything about that kind of thing. Now, Jesus even understood the man's desire, and he warned everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Matthew chapter 5, verse 28. It is with this understanding that men know this is one of their greatest single struggles of sin. Why the pornography industry is so lucrative. Why OnlyFans is a challenge, not just for men, but for women as well. Eggerichs explains that if a wife allows her husband to share about his struggles, she will have all the more opportunity to be his friend as well as his lover. And on the flip side, when a wife shames her husband, punishes him, or deprives him, he feels dishonored for who he is. As we see our needs met, she will find us reaching out to meet hers. As we go out to meet her needs, then we will find that she will be reaching out to meet ours. So, a couple questions that I have as we start the discussion portion. Whether in your current relationships or those of the past, where have you found your greatest challenges in the CHAIRS acronym? Conquest, hierarchy, authority, insight, relationship, and sexuality. And why? In the second question, what did you learn about yourself when you examined the CHAIRS acronym that maybe you didn't realize before? All right, I'm waiting to hear from you.